Welcome, I'm Michael Bickert. Thanks for joining me today as we explore concepts with the objective of improving your management skills and growing your business. Grab your notepads and your pen because I want you to take notes. I want you to make a commitment to yourself that you will jot down some sort of action item that you can implement in your business today. That's what this is all about, implementation to drive your business forward, make you more effective. And it may not even be something that we're talking about today. Just by exploring business concepts, you may find that an idea pops into your head, something that you can improve in your business. So jot that down when that happens. All right, today I'm going to respond to a request for a topic, and the person reached out to me and asked me to respond to the question about when is the best time in terms of human resource best practices, when is the best time to discuss remuneration, pay plan, benefits, wage, salary, whatever it happens to be. Where in the process does that belong? And so that's an excellent question. I want to start by saying anytime we're dealing with human resources, when we're dealing with the humanities portion of business, we have to acknowledge that there is no hard and fast rules. There is no complete black and white, right or wrong, because you're dealing with humans. People are all different and the situation varies. So I'm going to give you some universal concepts that will be the best way, because I don't want to cop out on this question. There are some pretty clear answers in terms of best practices, but there are exceptions to the rules, what I'm getting at here. All right, so I want you to think of human resources in terms of recruitment. I want you to think of that as very much like marketing. It's analogous to marketing. You are, in fact, trying to communicate a message to a target market, and your target market are talented individuals that you're trying to entice to come and be part of your organization. And so there's a lot of overlap in terms of the skill set and the mind and the strategy of what you would need to do as you're reaching out to customers to come and buy your product or service, or you're reaching out to talent that you're trying to acquire to join your team. And so that's the first place you need to start in terms of thinking about this question. And I have used, we've done other videos before on best practices for recruitment and other human resource things, and check those out for sure. I may repeat some of the same notions, but that's because these are the best practices. I like to use the American Idol analogy. What you're trying to do is you're trying to get as many people to audition as possible, with full knowledge going into it that you're going to get a lot of people who can't sing in this analogy, so to speak. So you've probably seen the audition shows like American Idol or The Voice, whatever. And there are some people who just don't have very much talent, and yet you want everybody. You don't want to filter too strongly at the beginning. Having said that, I really want to recommend and insist that you use truthfulness and transparency. You have to be honest in your marketing. So whatever message you send out, your employment posting, your job ad, has to be honest. You don't want to exaggerate. You certainly don't want to be dishonest and have people who are not qualified, who have no chance at the job, or who are coming. Really, the main thing you don't want is you don't want anybody to show up thinking it's one thing entirely different than what it truly is in terms of the position. And so with that in mind, as long as you are honest and as long as you are transparent, then you give some thought to your employment ad. And this is part of the marketing where you are going to introduce some of the concepts to the extent that it helps you and you have already made a decision on a range or a ballpark, let's call it, as to what the remuneration might look like. So, you know, you may not have somebody who's looking for $100,000 a year salary interested in a position that you know for sure you are only going to pay $50,000 a year for. So you may want to include that information. So you still can be a little bit vague because you're not 100% sure. You shouldn't make up your mind at this point. And that's another thing, a best practice I want to let you know, is you don't know 100% because we're talking about commensurate value exchange. So you might find an individual that sort of your ideal in terms of what you're thinking, your perception of what the ideal candidate might be, and that person, you might think, well, that person would work for $50,000 per year, and you extend that offer and you get somebody like that. But if you had somebody who actually could be twice as productive and it was really meaningful in terms of generating value for your organization, and you actually could justify $75,000 or even $100,000 for that same position, you would probably really want to consider that. And so, I'm using more of an extreme example here. Paying double the amount that you went into it thinking it'd be very unusual. But I do want you to have some flexibility in mind. Having said that, we're going to advertise in our employment posting some sort of range so that we can address that up front. And so we want as many people applying as possible. However, we want to make sure that this is a relevant position for them. We don't want somebody who absolutely wouldn't consider it. That's wasting their time, and it's wasting your time to have somebody like that apply. So you want to be respectful of other people's time and your own. So think of that as you are posting. And then when it comes to your perks and benefits, only the things that you are absolutely certainly going to include in this position should be included in the employment posting, the job ad. And I would recommend that if you know there's something you are going to include, I would recommend you put it in there. Again, you're trying to entice as many people as possible, like advertising to sell your product or service. You want as many people who are interested coming in. You want as many people who are interested applying for your position. So if you know for sure there's a particular benefit or perk that you are going to offer that everybody maybe in the company gets, or everyone in this particular position is afforded that perk, then you definitely should advertise that, and it just is going to increase your chances of getting qualified individuals coming out. Now, most benefits and perks, I would argue, should be somewhat flexible. So not everything is a for sure situation. Now, you may have a group health plan, for example, that the terms of the insurer, the coverage provider, actually insists that everybody in the organization is covered. And in that case, so you're going to have to include that, so you would include that in your employment posting. But if there's something extra, like maybe your amount of vacation days, that kind of stuff, if that's completely flexible, or it's very standard and it doesn't make you stand out, then I would leave that ambiguous. I wouldn't include that because it doesn't actually strengthen your position during the marketing portion of this, during the enticing people to come in. When you're attracting people, only use those things that are going to increase the numbers, because you should have really good filters set up as you bring people through the funnel to that, making that final selection of the person that you are going to hire. You want to have good filters that'll be able to take out the ones that you're not interested in, but you get as many as possible. Okay, the next thing I want to bring up is that I always had this expression that I used. I even would say this to people sometimes when they would ask me in what I thought was a premature time in the process, if they would start asking me specific details about the remuneration beyond what I've already shared, something that's pretty much ballparkish, and they know what to sort of expect, but they want specifics, how it works. Can you show me the pay plan? You mentioned a bonus. Can you tell me how that works? If it's premature, what I would recommend you do is, I used to say, and you don't have to use these word tracks, but it's helpful for you to think about it this way. I don't begin selling until I've decided to buy. So what I often would say to somebody is, we'll get into the more specific details once we get to the final position where we're going to make a job offer. Now, the reason this question was posed to me is because it's not uncommon. People will ask you about this stuff. They're trying to decide for themselves whether this position is a good fit for them or not. I understand that, but you're in the driver's seat. Remember, you're the one who's investing in them. Well, you're both taking a bit of a risk. If the organization was a bad fit for them, they could invest time. But I think we can agree that employers are taking the greater risk by hiring somebody, investing a lot. And if that person leaves at any time, as they are free to do, then the employer is out a bunch of money and time and effort and everything. And so you're in the driver's seat, so to speak, here. So you can say to the person, well, as we advertised, it's in the $50,000 range or $100,000 range or whatever. And it's somewhat negotiable, and we will make our final decision based on commensurate value exchange and the individual that we select, because not everyone is equally qualified and can demonstrate that they will offer equal value in this position. So you're basically telling people you can respond to that question by putting it off. Now here's a real key that I want you to pick up on here, is if a person is not willing to proceed, if they do what I call self-selection and they exit the process at this point, that was not the person you're looking for anyway. I would not want to hire an individual who, we know we're in the ballpark, but they need to know the exact amount before they proceed. That's not the right individual. I want somebody who doesn't think that way. So allow that to happen. If somebody's going to self-select and exit the process, unless there's exceptions to every rule, if there's something that they can substantiate that really makes them very attractive, then perhaps you've already made a decision. You should pull the trigger and negotiate with them at that moment. But to the extent that you're still undecided, then that tells me that this is not a person that you're super excited about, and they're asking you questions. You should be polite and professional and respond and say, we're going to get into those details a little closer to the final hiring decision. And you should entertain other questions that may be very important to them, and maybe there's something that you can explore at that point that will determine whether you guys are a good fit for one another. But really what I'm getting at here is this is your opportunity. This is your time to figure out whether this person's a good fit. You can cooperate a little bit and allow them to know, but their decision comes once you've made a job offer. So it's not like you're being unfair to them. They haven't committed to anything yet. They're just going through the screening process. So again, you're in the driver's seat. Do not start selling until you've decided to buy. I've seen the opposite, where several managers who work for me would be engaged in interviews, and they were so busy building rapport and trying to sell the organization as a great place to work that they never found out anything about the individual that they were trying to screen, that they were trying to determine whether it makes it past that filter or not and on to the next round of cuts, so to speak. So don't do that. Make sure you're doing the listening, you're asking most of the questions. I always ended interviews by giving them an opportunity for questions, but frequently I had to say, yeah, we'll cover that one in greater detail if it becomes imperative at that point. I mean, really what we're saying is there's no point in covering that ground unless we hire you. It doesn't matter, it really doesn't matter unless we hire you. So think of that, and remember the concept that a person is probably not who you're looking for if that doesn't work for them. If they find that to be unreasonable, then there's something about them. And I also want to make a point here and a bit of a caveat, if you've struggled with this recently, that anytime a central authority, specifically government, interferes with the job market, that is, they maybe offer extended benefits because of something going on or whatever, where a person is incented not to work, they're incentivized to not work. There's great big employment benefits, employment insurance benefits, unemployment benefits is what I'm trying to say. Then they are skewing the market. That's a complete market distortion. So when we talk about this and the analogy of marketing, you're talking about employment market here. And there are people who are like, well, the government's giving me all sorts of money right now to stay at home, so I'm gonna ask a lot of qualifying questions. If I hit the lottery, so to speak, with this job, I would consider leaving all those sweet benefits I'm getting from the government, coming back to the workforce. Again, that's somebody you're not interested in. You're not looking for that. But I did want to make the point that completely distorts the market, and some of the best practices you implement in your recruitment don't seem to work, and you're finding it very difficult. Well, we have central authority who may have been well-intended, they often are well-intended, but they have unintended consequences, and they skew the market, and it makes it very difficult for employers to try to hire talent. But you're gonna have to get through that. That does happen from time to time. It's going on a lot more recently, I understand that, and I can appreciate that. So the answer is, now once you've decided, you've made a decision, you've decided who you're going to hire, that is the time to negotiate. And I will insist that you leave some room for negotiation. Do not put in your mind a strict number. This is the budget. This is what we're hiring for. that might be that, you can't afford more than $70,000 per year for a particular position, or $50,000, whatever it may be. You can't afford more than $12 or $15 per hour for this position. Again, you want to leave room on both ends, because what if the person can provide a lot of value and they're like, hey, I've got this particular skill that could work for you. Like, I'm going to be doing some video editing as well for you. I can do that on the side. And oh, wow. We actually had been outsourcing that, and if you can do that for us, we can add that too, and we can do this much per video or whatever. This is just a sort of an outlandish example, but I've been there where I've been communicating with a person. I find out they can do something, they want to earn more money, and in the negotiation I say, oh, well, if you can provide more value, can you do this above and beyond what our role description was? Then we'll pay you X, Y, or Z more than that. The opposite can happen, where you find somebody who is willing to take less, and I would recommend you do that. Now, I don't always hire a person for the least amount possible. Sometimes they're willing to take far less, and I'll give them more than they're asking for, because I'm looking for commensurate value exchange. But I love the idea of leaving some room that after 30, 60, or 90 days, they can get a performance review, and it turns out they're as great as we thought they were, we can give them a raise right away. When conversely you hit the upper ceiling of what you can afford to pay, make sure you communicate that up front and say, well, don't be expecting a raise within anytime soon, because this is, the top end of the budget. But in your mind, you're always leaving some flexibility. So when you offer the position, that is the best time to negotiate and to really respond to those questions, and be upfront, be transparent, and ask questions. Don't just try to read the person's mind. So if you said, well, we're prepared to offer you the position and it pays $50,000 per year, and the person was like, oh, okay. When do you need to know by, or whatever? Now you need to start asking questions. Oh, okay, so I'd like to know now if I can. I need to speak with my wife or whatever. I can appreciate that. What are you thinking? What are your thoughts? If it were up to you strictly right now. Now this is where we made the analogy to marketing, sales and marketing. Sometimes if I found somebody I really want, I'm gonna use some of those closing skills at this point. Now I have decided to buy, so I start selling, and I start to bring out all the big guns in terms of convincing the person how great an organization we are. Now is the time to invest the time to let them know all the great things about working there. Maybe you've got some flexibility, you've got some flex days, you have some autonomy that you afford them. You should have in the interview process found out a little bit about what they didn't like about their last employer, why they, what their aspirations are, where they see themselves. And if you're a good fit there, if you can match all of that stuff, maybe you remind them. But the key I was leaving off on there is to ask good questions at that point. Say to them, okay, well, if it were up to you, and let's say your wife was completely on board and everything, what are you thinking? I'm interested in getting inside your head. What we talked about today, how does that work for you? And then shut up and listen to them and respond. Try to get out any potential objections. They may say, I'm delighted actually. And then you could say something, okay, well, shall we agree in principle? Shall we have a handshake agreement with the condition that as a formality, you're going to talk to your spouse or whatever? Sometimes I do it the other way around, where maybe Bickert Management, BMI, is hiring on behalf of another client, and that client may say, well, I want to make the final decision. I want to meet them. Often that's not the case. They'll leave it completely up to us. But sometimes they will give us one thing. They just want to touch base with us before we make a hiring decision. I may, if I find the right person, I may have my HR team say, as a formality, we do need to touch base with the client, but we're very confident. Why don't we have a handshake agreement? I want to take them out of the market. I don't want them going to that next interview they may have set up, or sending out more resumes, that kind of thing. So again, the answer to the question that was posed of me, when is the best time, in terms of best practices, when is the best time to discuss remuneration, perks, and benefits? It's when you've made a hiring decision. And the way to remember this is, don't start selling until you've decided to buy. That is meaning, metaphorically, you are buying the candidate, you're paying them to work for you. So you're not going to sell them on all the reasons that they should work for you until you've made the decision you're going to buy. Now you're really going to do everything in your power to convince them that you're a great place, and that goes to those perks, the benefits, and remuneration, pay plan, and that kind of stuff. Just reiterating some of the things, the best practice, make sure you leave some negotiation. In my case, we might go back to a client and say, we recommend you stretch the budget a little bit for this particular candidate. This person has skills X, Y, or Z that may actually really benefit your organization, and they are head and shoulders. But you got to be able to substantiate these things and be careful. Boy, I can go on and on as we talk about human resource, in particular recruitment, because it's a bit of an art. And so maybe that's where I should leave it. And if this stuff sounds intimidating to you, or if you've done this with very little success and you find yourself spinning through candidates, employee churn as it's called, reach out to us. Really, like, we can do this for a fraction of what other companies can do this for. We have some proprietary techniques for filtering. We get lots of candidates, and we can narrow it down to the right people. We'll have a link in the description of this video so that you can reach out to us very quickly and you can explore our pricing. But not only that, is we just save you a ton of time and put a really excellent candidate. We have a 3-candidate guarantee, and we can do all the negotiation for you, and you don't have to worry about any of this stuff. But I hope you took something away from this that you can use if you are doing any kind of your own recruitment, talent acquisition. And if so, then leave a comment. And when you leave a comment, and whether you agree with me or you think of something that I forgot to say or we need to elaborate or whatever, anything that you leave and people read in the community that are also trying to enhance their management skills, they learn. And we need to learn from one another. Perpetual refinement.